Hello, everyone. A very good morning to all, and welcome to the day 2 of the 6th edition of the NutriThink Conference 2021. I hope yesterday was an insightful day for all, and we look forward to your presence throughout today. We have exciting quiz contests going around throughout the day. For example, the very first question for everyone here is, name the exhibitor brand that uses the tagline, Innovations Through Formulations. We look forward to your answers in the chat box here. We will be posting the question on the chat box as well. The one who answers the quickest wins a voucher on behalf of Pharma markets in India. Also, we have lucky draws for all the delegates who visit and has meetings with every booth on the platform. Do not miss out the opportunity today and let us know by posting on the event feed or contacting us on the chat box. Without further ado, it is my honor to introduce our very first panel for the day with our panel members, Dr. Nandan Joshi, Head Medical Affairs for Nutrition for India and Emerging Markets at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. We have Mr. Ajay Verghese. He's the Managing Director for Bipha Pharmaceuticals. We have Mr. Shivam Puri. He's the CEO for Cipla Health Limited. And we have Sangeetha Srinivasan. She's the Vice President, Strategy and Marketing for Fermenta Biotech Limited. My honor to invite our moderator for the session, Ms. Pushpa Vijayaraghavan. She's the Director for Healthcare and Lifesciences at Sathguru Consultants. Over to you, Pushpa.
Thank you, Sangeetha. What a pleasure to come back, I think, with friends in the industry. This is a conversation we keep having often. So glad to have it with a larger forum today. And couldn't be more excited about the mix of the composition of this panel. I think we keep talking about how pharma and nutra today is getting so merged, and the composition of this panel reflects that. As all of us have chatted before about the composition of this panel, and I think the one thing that all panelists converged on was just that the COVID impact is impossible to deny. COVID wasn't good for the world. I think it's been a tremendous setback globally, both economic and health-wise. But the one thing that happened is that it turned the focus on health. It turned the focus from policymakers on health. It turned the focus from consumers on health. Preventive health came into focus. Consumers went and bought supplements in loads. They sought out recourse in their traditional medicine cabinet. They got back to grandma's recipes. They got to buy first tablets. They looked at formats where they could consume it. And yes, the world was divided. Clinicians were divided about what happened, but the trend was real. So I'm going to lean on my panelists to first frame for us really what this COVID impact was. There is so much noise around the surge in demand. Was that for real? Did supplement demand surge? Has there been a real increase in terms of focus on preventive health? And within that, has there been, again, a quest for nutraceuticals? I'm going to turn to Shivam, who leads Cipla's OTC business, Cipla Health, to frame that for us, to give us his insights on what has been Cipla's experience around demand surge. Has that been across preventive health? And is this here to stay? Shivam?
Yeah, thanks for that, Pushpa. Good morning, everyone. The way I look at it, COVID almost redefined VUCA for us. This is a term that I'm sure many of us in businesses would have started to hear about some 7-8 years back. And people were trying to explain what VUCA means. But for me, what happened post-COVID is the real definition of VUCA. The extent of volatility, uncertainty that exists around all of us came to the fore. Honestly, no one had any clue when wave 1 struck on saying where to run, what to do. And, people were just following each other in their, in terms of their footsteps. And the other thing that struck me a lot about this was the fact that even within COVID, it was not consistent. So wave 1, the consumer behavior that one saw, wave 1 unlock, then wave 2 partial lock, and wave 2 unlock. Each of these 4 also have been different. So this whole premise of the fact that you can actually create trends basis history, was thrown out of the window, and one had to learn as one went about. And I think the demand that we saw from consumers was in a way reflection of that. Coming back to your question, Pushpa. So, for example, walking a bit out of the nutraceuticals, the kind of maddening demand one saw for, say, sanitizers case in point, you didn't see that kind of demand in wave two, as it went up. People were more conscious of the fact that maybe we don't need to, surround ourselves with all kinds of sanitizers. Maybe there's another way to take care of ourselves in these times. And for example, wave one did not see as much surge of, say, vitamin C and zinc, while wave two actually showed massive surge for some of these. And I can assure you that what you would see, and we all hope that wave three never happens, but if it comes, I don't think wave two would be a good explanation of what to expect even in wave three. And I think a lot of that is driven by public conversations, right? So vitamin C and zinc became a thing of wave two. Sanitizer was a thing of wave one. Almost everyone wanted to stock up with sanitizer. Wave three, difficult to predict. But what is for real is that I think the consciousness of the fact that one needs to manage immunity and one has to be, strong internally to be able to take care of oneself in these times, that's for sure landed with a thud. And we have seen conversations change. And on a lighter note, we used to sell a product. I can't name that in this forum, but we used to sell a product. And I myself went to a lot of these consumers for conversations. The understanding of immunity almost used to 50% understood, 50% used to ask back, saying, so what part of immunity are you talking about? Now immunity actually, even a kid in the house actually talks about immunity and asks his parents saying, what are you doing about my immunity? So I think the awareness of immunity, awareness to stay healthy and strong, clearly, I think we've never had so much awareness around it pre-COVID. And that for me is the biggest change, Pushpa, that we've seen. And I think that will only go up. So one thing that will stay consistent is that the importance of healthy living, safe living, making yourself strong from inside, etc., all of those trends will for sure keep going up. Even if by God's grace, this starts to settle down a bit, because they are rare for sure.
That's encouraging, Shivam, because the focus on preventive health, India's been such a vitamins in its market. In some ways, not so much of a focus on preventive health being so strong, but like you're saying, that awareness pervasive, even the kid talking about immunity is truly encouraging for the category and the segment. You spoke about vitamin C. I mean, I've also seen a lot of hoopla around vitamin D. I'll shift to Sangeetha here. Fermenta is known for being a vitamin D company, but I know you all are expanding rapidly into several nutraceutical and other products. But as a vitamin D, large vitamin D company, was your experience similar to what Shivam articulated? Are you seeing the surge here to stay, and was the surge for real?
Absolutely. I would, agree with what Shivam just said. Vitamin D, yes, definitely. We have seen a very upward surge in demand for vitamin D, very well established. I would rather put it this way. This COVID scenario has created a cluster of ingredients or products that has moved from nice to have to need to have. That kind of a movement has been very clearly seen, even for any vitamin. Take a B complex or a vitamin C or a vitamin D, a probiotic or omega 3. All these were nice to have, supplements with Indians, and the need for this was not very well seen by Indians. But now most of these supplements have gone to the need to have category. So it's just not about immunity now. Though immunity is spoken very loud and clear, there is a lot of focus on personal health. So anti-inflammatory compounds have, from a scientific standpoint, I'm saying it could be just from a consumer standpoint, it could be heart health, it could be joint health, it could be just old age. People have started focusing on aging a lot, healthy aging a lot. So there is definitely a wider impact on several ingredients and several products. Vitamin D is definitely seen a surge. It is a positive surge, and there are various trials, various research literature support that clearly talks about the link or positive association between vitamin D and the infection and the mortality rate with COVID. And I would say the way vitamin D has moved now is what people have been talking is calcium homeostasis, bone and joint health is the area where vitamin D was revolving around. Now the gamut has expanded. Now we see that vitamin D has more molecular role to play, and immunity has become a very, very strong aspect to connect with vitamin D. So I would definitely agree with what Shivam said.
And in fact, probably why vitamin D is probably an area of immunity supplement where the world's been very divided. So, later in the discussion, look forward to talking more about, consumer confidence and things like that. But, I'm glad on this panel we've got both Cipla and Dr. Reddy. I think both responded.
Just to add, Pushpa, I mean, earlier when on the marketing side, when we were doing ingredient marketing, there used to be connotations when we speak on immunity concepts. There used to be questions that even a hand wash talks about immunity. What can a supplement do? So these kind of connotations use very, very common connotations as to what is the tangible benefit one gets with immunity products. Unfortunately, COVID has answered that. We didn't want COVID around, but unfortunately or fortunately, we got an answer. What immunity products can do.
Sure. I think that the whole consumer awakening has been definitely a blessing in disguise. I was just kind of also mentioning that we've got pharma companies here which have responded with portfolio expansions to rapidly launching, responding to consumer need. Nandan, I'll shift to you. Can you talk to how, as a company, you all have responded to COVID? I know the portfolio has evolved. There have been new launches. So if you want to touch upon just what you've sensed as a consumer need and how that response was thought through.
Sure. First of all, thanks Informa Market for organizing this session and giving this opportunity and platform. So coming to your question, Pushpa, I think I will look at it from two different ways. The first is, very rightly said by Shivam, overall the awareness of immunity has gone up. And that led to repositioning the existing products because we never looked at existing product from an immunity lens. For example, let's say you had a protein supplement with micronutrients. You never positioned it in immunity, but there is a great role, what protein plays in immunity, what each and every micronutrient plays, whether it's stimulating the innate immunity or adaptive immunity systems. So there is a lot of conversation we started doing on existing brands around immunity with doctors, with consumers. I think that's very, very important. I think one example I can give is diabetes, for example. Now, diet plays a very important role. So does the partial or complete meal replacements that are typically given to diabetic patients to manage the sugar in a better way, to manage their weight in a better way. Now, that has been a traditional conversation for years, but suddenly, we saw that diabetic people are at a higher risk of COVID, especially when they got admitted to hospital. At that time, what was their sugar level actually decided how complicated the COVID journey is going to be. So that suddenly led to the conversation, exploring the literature, finding out the research or even starting a new research on how does managing a blood sugar level in a better way helps prevent the infection or helps prevent the complications of COVID. So that brought the nutrition supplement into a very different category altogether and have that conversation with both diabetics as well as with the diabetologist, endocrinologist across the country. And I think we had done several sessions on these topics, which has got great response. I would also appreciate the fact that some international guidelines, for example, ESPEN released the first time released the nutrition management guidelines in COVID, which was not there earlier, and very rightly said, it took almost 6 to 8 months to get those guidelines out, and where they had very specific recommendations. And you realize that, okay, you already have a product which fits into these recommendations. So, so you then position yourself, you start having those conversations, you bring these guidelines to, discuss with pulmonologists or the intensivists who are treating this patient and talk about the nutrition. So I think that I would say this part has been evolved quite a bit. And the second part is, of course, how can we create a portfolio of new launches, which, of course, has to be sustainable has to go beyond COVID, because see, by the time, the typical innovation cycle, by the time you conceive something and launch, the first wave was over. So it's not like, so you cannot be opportunistic. So definitely there has been a great, strategy which is in place, and which is long term, and we are already working on. Few launches have already happened, and we are looking at it from a holistic perspective. It's not only just fighting the infection. We have recently launched melatonin, compound. So melatonin has both been part of COVID protocol. Melatonin also plays an important role in sleep, for example. So you have to also has to be very, very holistic. So I think that has been our approach so far. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Nandan. Ajay, I know, at the heart of Wi-Fi is traditional knowledge, and Indians have consumed tulsi forever for immunity or other ingredients. It's come out of the home garden or the cabinet in the kitchen. How did you adapt? I know there are immunity combos you're doing, and you're very mainstream as a nutraceutical company, very B2C. The first time I started using Bipha products was when I bought it at the airport. So I think you've got ease of access in terms of channels. So how did you respond to this demand as a nutraceutical company positioned, in the consumer space, and really targeting the COVID trend today? Ajay, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pushpa, for that big question. And I feel, all the early speakers, I guess, we too had our share of, shock when COVID occurred. And when you say, all our retail outlets are at airports, you could wonder what it could be on a day like we have to shut all the stores. And that's where the VUCA started for us, as Shivam said. In fact, like we always say, it is primarily, sometimes, so-called bad things are also good opportunities. So if you don't have a choice, then you follow what you need to do. And then, yes, of course, we started on really with the sanitizers, as Nandan said, we started with that. And primarily, I think for us, it was more of a disruptive event, what we saw, rather than a destructive event, because we can call it a destructive event, but I feel it's a disruptive event. And it's certainly a disruptive event when we look at it from health, wellness, or holistic or awareness per se on the consumer side. Because if you take in India, typically see, we are a country where, we believe Ayurveda is born and nurtured and, has developed, and part of our culture, part of our tradition, part of our household, part of folklore, part of local knowledge, part of what we've been provided as information passed on from generations. But in terms of real awareness on, on products, on ingredients, on functions, or on what anything can do for you, is where this country lacked. It's like water all around, but we don't really know the value of it, and we don't know what it really does. We know water is good for many things, but we don't know what in water is what and what is water good for. So that is where the situation was. So there was a lot of talk on Ayurveda. There's a lot of talk on the potential of Ayurveda, a lot of talk on how Ayurvedic ingredients can be used for nutraceuticals, for health, wellness, and holistic management. But I think it never was there. I mean, it was just probably a Patanjali which came out of the blue and then did a whole lot of awareness, which, did one, I would say, fire shot in the air. But, that's history now. But then COVID really brought this out of the, the so-called, closed box to outside, where people were compelled, like I think one of the speakers said, the need to have, it's like the need to know. It was always nice to know and talk about Ayurveda, but now there was a need, the real need to know things. And that's where the consumer started researching. That's where we understood about how vitamin D, being what it was, came out, and now a consumer understands what all it can do, and or like how diabetes can be managed today, which was all known, which was all there as an awareness, but then it was never, nobody went beyond what they heard to understand what they really had to know. So this is what was the biggest challenge, I would say, in India, in terms of why the market never grew so big as against expectations. This is exactly what the West did, but because awareness about each ingredient is, I would say, 10-fold or 20-fold above what we have in the land of Ayurveda. So I think the COVID was the biggest disruptor, I would say it is not a great event, but it's an event which created more focus, more attention, more in-depth analysis on what we have and what it can do. So it has brought up definitely a whole lot of opportunities. For us, we've in fact launched more than 70, 80 or 90 products. I've lost count now because we've been launching spontaneously right, left and center because the demand was so good, and you can either wait or you think or plan or strategize, or you can do. So we took the last one, we started doing things, and we felt the opportunity is also huge or immense. And the whole point was about time. Like you said, by the time you launch, you might be through the second, you're on the second wave, and now they're talking about the third wave, and you don't know what you should expect. So that's where the challenge and the opportunity lies. And of course, I guess we could do that, and I'm sure there are definitely hundreds of Indian companies which have done that same process. The other biggest change which I've seen is the adoption of digital markets, and digital consumption has. We all know now that it's something that was happening in the country, but it just went by leaps and bounds. And today, yes, of course, people are so comfortable, so buying products, digitally. So that has created a huge market suddenly. From anywhere in the country to anywhere in the country, we can deliver, supply products, or people can buy. So that was again a big opening, which I would say every company and every consumer got. And this all happened owing to COVID. And I think this is now creating a larger thought process on what are the different things that we can bring and what are the different things that consumers can consume. Which actually takes us to the next point is how do we create products for these consumers? Now, yes, so far they knew, so far they understood, but they weren't consuming. Now they're aware. Now they're researching. Now a whole lot of products and services might be required. Now, what are the organizations? What are the companies in the sector going to do? Is I guess the biggest question that we all need to answer now, because this is actually also throwing up a whole lot of opportunities. Because earlier, if you would say, there weren't awareness, there wasn't consumption, there was a disruption of supply chain, or there wasn't channels which we could deliver. Today, it's all there in place. So now the question is, now what are we as an industry going to do to see that this consumption is met? I think I would like to close at this note, because I think this is what I feel is what we should rather now think of, rather than be talking about what could COVID do. And whatever COVID has done is done. So what can we do from here is where I would like to put it. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think, we look forward. I've heard a few thoughts from all of you in terms of, science, the marketing, the communication, the portfolio channels. I think there have been several thoughts that I look forward to, I think, engaging, kind of discussing some of those. Nandan, I'll turn to you. I think you have strong thoughts around confidence, consumer confidence, and, we're saying consumer interest is peaked. So how do we maintain that, infusing confidence levels? I know Sangeetha both, had strong thoughts around it. So look forward to, hearing out what you think on how we maintain this momentum, because we're really looking forward to the market here. We've got substantial momentum, consumer interest is peaked. How do we build on that and then convert that into confidence in preventive health solutions, be it OTC, nutraceutical, or anything in between? What do you think is the main thing to do to achieve consumer confidence?
Sure, Pushpa. I think building the credibility, building the credibility to this entire immunity category, I think that is, as a industry, is our responsibility, what I feel, which will help keep this category alive and sustainable in a very long run, because the challenge is here to stay. The immunity concerns are for real, and they are here to stay. So if you ask me, I think a few things as an industry we should all do is, one is have the right mindset. So that means let's not look at this as a very short-term opportunistic category. Let's have a long-term play. Of course, there will be some short-term launches that will keep happening, but we need to have a more long-term thinking. The second is the right strategy. So it's not only about fighting the infection. I think right now all of us have a very narrow lens of looking at fighting the infection. And that's what I think even largely the consumer, if you ask them right now, they have understood this part very well, that it's about fighting the infection. And maybe building my natural immunity or building my innate immunity. I think that's what consumer largely understands. But I think it's all about the immune balance. If you look at, like Sangeetha rightly said, inflammation management is a bigger part of the whole gamut, because if you're not managing your inflammation in the long run, that's a problem with your immune system, and which can lead to the chronic disorders like obesity, diabetes, etc., because they are now all known to be originating from inflammation. The third aspect is the allergy. Allergy is on rise. If you look at the pediatric allergy cases, there has been a significant increase in last 10 years owing to pollution, owing to the changing lifestyle, owing to the disruption in the mother's diet, etc. So allergy is another big piece that we need to look at. And then, so this is the entire gamut of immunity. So when you strategize, you need to make sure that you are not just talking about fighting infection. Of course, that's one part. But how can we strengthen the immunity in a larger sense, which also includes, by the way, eliminating the cancer cells, etc. So we need to have right kind of launches which manage, which addresses the different aspects of immunity. So right strategy, right science. The third aspect is the right science. We need to make sure whatever we are delivering, it is scientifically substantiated and need to be at right dosage, right duration. So there should not be, so a lot of time, because we all sit on internally on meetings where cost is a very, very important aspect. The budgets, there are constraints, and we all agree to that. Also, we need to make sure that we have to deliver the product at a right price to the consumer. So sometimes there it becomes a battle between the right pricing versus the right dosage, or the right format for that matter, or investing in clinical trials for that matter. I think those are very, very important things. We need to have good data. We need to have Indian data. We need to go beyond mechanistic evidence, because a lot of evidence that currently where the claims are being made is largely mechanistic. So people are talking things like, oh, it stimulates T lymphocytes, B lymphocytes, or it stimulates your natural killer cells. So what? What does it mean from a consumer perspective? What does it reduce the risk of infection, for example, by X percentage? So those are the questions you will see, which will come in the days to come. So we need to have, whether it's herbal ingredient-based supplements, or either vitamin or mineral supplementation, or even if you're talking about the protein supplement with all the micronutrients, whatever we call it, the formats, we need to have the right science in place. And the fourth is the right, I think the regulatory framework is quite there. But I would suggest, in terms of responsible marketing, having the right claims, because you see a lot of, there is little bit of distrust also. Currently, we like Sangeetha brought out, if everybody's talking about immunity, I mean, I have seen immunity pillows also being advertised. So, we need to make sure we have the right claims done in a right way, right properly, and following the regulatory framework. And of course, the regulatory framework needs to also evolve, especially around immunity with the changing landscape as well. So I think those are the things as an industry we should all do. Of course, creating awareness is part of the overall marketing plan. But I think these are, building credibility. I think that will make this more sustainable. Yeah. Sure. Thank you.
So Sangeetha, you had some similar thoughts on communicating both to clinicians and consumers on the lines of building confidence, again, data-driven. Is that a focus from your end as well in terms of Fermenta?
Sorry, Pushpa, was the question for me?
Yeah. I was just asking if you actually emphasize the same aspect of communicating, in a data-driven way, both to consumers and clinicians in the vitamin D context, what you're trying to do. Would you like to add to what Nandan mentioned in terms of building consumer confidence with more scientific data backing?
Yes, I mean, see, one way this opportunity marketing is pretty scary, because a lot of people start talking immunity. That's where, I mean, what Nandan said about the credibility aspect becomes really important. For vitamin D, what we did and we are doing right now is creating a white paper on the role of vitamin D in immunity, in collaboration with a very respected institute in India. I can't talk about it till it's launched, as though. So that, but we are doing on the white paper bringing out all the signs. It's a very, it's a neutral voice, talks about the plus and also the challenges with vitamin D supplementation. Apart from that, what I mean, unfortunately, when we were going through this process of the white paper, it was a big education even for me. The level of research that has been done in the last 2 years with vitamin D and its role in immunity, it's mind-boggling amount of data that's available right now. It's earlier it was like, information everywhere and knowledge nowhere. So today we are moving into a phase that we are converting this information into knowledge. So we are trying our best to communicate the right message, take the science forward. And today what I feel in India, what is lacking is there is a lot of product marketing that happens, but very less ingredient level science that is being communicated to consumers. So I feel there has to be certain importance given to ingredient science as well, because it's more like Intel Inside. So that's what is going to be speaking for the product rather than the product itself. I do understand brands, profit, everything, but somewhere the ingredient science is forgotten. Another important aspect that I always keep thinking about is, if I want to take an insurance, if I want to sell a car, if I want to buy a gadget, there is somewhere I know I can refer to some credible information coming from experts. I don't have that means for something that I'm going to be consuming. There is no consumer who can take a reference of a particular website or any other digital media sources where they know how to select a supplement, how to choose ingredients, what are the main things that they need to be looking at when they are seeing or trying to purchase a protein supplement for that matter. What are the key parameters that they are going to be selecting a protein supplement on? What today we are left with thanks to e-commerce is looking at the reviews at Amazon. What are the reviews? What reviews do we get? I mean, we do not even know whether they are paid reviews or unpaid reviews. So that's the way we have, I think there is I'm not too sure whether I'm answering to the point, but there is a challenge at a consumer level. And I feel it's the responsibility just not of the industry, but also of the academia. It's also of the industry associations working jointly towards clearing this chaotic situation in the mind of the consumer. Though we are talking about this opportunity of immunity, people picking up supplements, I just hope this is just not an adaptive or a fad kind of, though we believe this is a trend to last, but this shouldn't become a fad because there is no clear communication coming out on the science of these ingredients. So ingredient science is really important to be communicated to consumers. I think that has slowly started happening, but the pace at which it is happening, I don't think it is at an efficient pace.
In fact, on the Intel Inside, there are leading Indian companies where they probably enjoyed Intel Inside strategy in the global nutraceutical or supplement market, right? When Indian curcumin brands, lutein brands are, you pick up a GNC bottle, you see an Indian brand of the ingredient flashed out like an Intel Inside. So I think at the other end we have, but at the Indian consumer side, not really. So this is absolutely, I think I'm going to, both you and Nandan have emphasized important scientific communication, education in the right way. I'm going to tilt to Ajay here because, it's a company built on science. Traditional knowledge is science in traditional form. But I hear him talk about simplifying communication in a different way. He says, I want to connect with the millennials. I want to simplify. Ajay, you're not emphasizing heavy science. You're saying it's there, but how do I simplify it for consumption? So what's your view on communicating in a way that we expand the market, we expand user base. Do we need to simplify? Do we need to get more scientific? What's your take on that?
Thanks, Pushpa. I think there are two perspectives to this. I guess one perspective has already been mentioned, which is the deep science, or I mean, the responsible science and the responsible scientific communication that we need to do. In fact, and the ingredient science, I believe that's pretty much a very, very clear point, because they're all very critical points when it comes to a sustainable long-term strategy. And I think that's primarily where we need to go. As far as the Indian market is concerned, so far as I've seen, because I've been closely following how Ayurvedic space evolved in this country, because people talk about Ayurveda being a big industry, but in reality, we are very small still if you compare to global standards, whereas many ingredients from Ayurveda is become a billion-dollar business today worldwide. So this is where this whole difference of a science, a holistic science and ingredients, when we compare, this is where the real gap is. And in fact, why these ingredients so big is because the science was intact and it was properly documented and it was well communicated and the consumers understood it and it was consumed. So that is the long-term funnel or the long-term strategy that we need to have in this space. And this needs to be responsible and credible as well. But India today, if you really look at it, India, it's a real big mess because we have a billion population and everybody seeming to know everything about Ayurveda. I'm now talking purely from an Ayurvedic perspective. I'm not taking a nutraceutical perspective. I'm not taking a nutrition perspective. But Ayurveda has, what is happening on the regulatory side and on the industry side is it's getting increasingly more and more regulated. It's getting more and more concentrated. And Ayurveda, if you really look at it, it's a coded knowledge base. It is documented well, but it's also coded. And half of the people, I would say, majority of the people don't still know how to use it, is what I have. This is a pure Ayurvedic perspective. We're not talking nutrition now. And this is where I believe the market never grew beyond what it should have or it could have. So this is where I say we need to make it more and more, simple, more and more understandable, and more, to the consumer to know, see, what would this do for this, So simple communication may need to go onto the space of Ayurveda. So it becomes more mainstream and it becomes more consumed and it is more understood and, it will become mass market than what it is today. The other end of the spectrum is where we see, nutraceuticals and nutrition coming out of this Ayurveda, which definitely the scientific validation, because today's consumer thinks more logically and more data-based rather than emotion-based or belief-based. So, you need to finally come to that. So I guess we need to see it as a journey where, if you're talking very Ayurveda, talk simple, talk straight, and talk in a manner that people can understand. And if we're looking at the medium to the long term, I would say even the Ayurvedic ingredients or the herbal ingredients, what we would derive from Ayurveda, needs to be scientifically validated. Because international market is all about ingredient based. I mean, it's all about what ingredients does. Ayurveda is all about what combinations does. So we're talking two things here. So from one perspective, you have a combined holistic health system, which is more emotional and more, it needs to be simplified. The other end, we need to have more science-based, validated, credible, responsible information flowing out. That is only going to get us global, for sure. But you cannot take the entire Ayurveda industry global, or because I guess it's already industry which is kind of getting out of this Ayurvedic frame to a science frame. So I think the moment that happens, this can see, growth happening by leaps and bounds. But there's definitely a lot of, levers that we can take out of Ayurveda, which can go global, which needs all the scientific communication that we need to have. The other important aspect is also the connect with the millennials. I guess that's one big market that we need to focus when we talk from a long-term perspective. I think those are the real market drivers of today. And, with social media and smartphones, I guess that's the biggest knowledge, anchor from where I guess all the strategy should be based on. So that is where I guess the connect needs to still happen. I'm sure they're more aware of nutrition, but how much they're aware of Ayurveda and Ayurvedic ingredients is a big question mark I still have, because I think that is where I would say another opportunity lies for Ayurveda to grow. But for nutrition to grow, it's definitely a larger market and more structured information can do the job, is what I feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajay. So I just talk about simplified communication, millennials, but also digital channels. Shivam, I'm shifting to you here. I think you all have been focused on large markets, large categories. You're building for scale, credible channels with the pharma background that Cipla Health enjoys in the parent. Uh, what do you see as changes in terms of channels here? How do you see consumer engagement evolving? What do you see as drivers of growth in terms of channels or consumer engagement? Do you see new channels emerging, and what are major growth drivers from your perspective?
I think Pushpa, Nandan, Ajay, and Sangeetha have very well actually covered a lot of it. In terms of, I think the principles remain the same. That would be the principles for any brand. I think first very critical one is don't compromise with the product that goes to market, come what may. If it's about an ingredient that you put in, it better well serve the purpose, and don't put in something which does not perfectly fit in and goes well with the product. I think beyond that, it's actually eventually about, as in marketing, we say physical reach and mental reach. Mental reach being how many number of minds, are you currently, who are aware of you, and physical reach would be how many physical touch points does the product sit in. And I think eventually this is the time when brands come in and play a role, because these are the times where a consumer is seeking a helping hand. So, as a brand, it's our responsibility to hold her hand and take her to where she needs to go, rather than a group, trying out loud. And I think one of the panelists commented on, mattresses claiming that they are immunity products, etc. I think that's a disaster of a communication from from our perspective. And I think it takes away a lot of credibility on, how serious and critical this space is. So as brands, at least for our community, it's important that we ensure we are perfect to the hilt. Whatever we communicate, we stand for it. And for us, it's very clear, Pushpa, that if the product doesn't fit the bill, we don't launch the product. If profitability is a concern, we better will not launch it rather than launch something of compromise. Very, very clear on that. And once you've done that, I think then the brand overall starts to play that role of, giving comfort and confidence to the consumer, saying, if this brand is telling me that, must be right, because this brand does no wrong. And I think these are the times where brands have to assume that. We've seen that happen in FMCG. I have a lifer in FMCG industry. That's where I come from. And we have seen brands actually becoming so trustworthy amongst consumers that if the brand tells you something, people just blindly go and pick it up. And they are 99% of the times consumers are happy listening to the brands. So I think that kind of credibility now needs to be brought in here. It's not about, specific combinations. It's about a brand which gives you the assurance and confidence of safety. And I see that happening, Pushpa, over the last couple of years. I've actually seen brands take up that role and mantle very well. I don't think everyone has done that, but some of the larger brands seems to have done a really good job at it. And other than that, it's, from a channel boom perspective, all of us are aware e-commerce is doing well. And the way we look at it is how many physical touch points am I creating? As simple as that. And every channel is just a cog in the wheel, and eventually it's a number. So there are 8 lakh chemists and there are, 80 lakh grocers in the country. How many chemists am I present in? How many grocers am I present in? E-com comes in and adds to that kitty. And of course, there is a bit of duplication somewhere, but eventually even e-com is a number of consumers that you end up reaching as a part of this thing there. And that's how we track it. And I spoke about mental reach earlier. We track how many minds has the brand gotten into. And we actually have a hard count of that. And the job as a marketer and as a seller of large brands is to keep taking that number up with very, very credible messaging. Because once the message goes in and it's a credible brand talking, people end up translating that communication into a purchase. So, but other than that, I think the panelists on the have done a fantastic job answering that question. So I won't repeat that.
Thank you, Shiva. And on the note of credible brand talking to consumer and mind share, you all have the advantage of reach to physicians as well. And there has been a traditional approach of also talking to consumers through physicians for a lot of these OTC products. So are you seeing more direct B2C communication to build that kind of recall value and brand positioning today? And is that going to evolve in the future?
So, Pushpa, I think if you're talking about communication, it's always been B2C for us, right? So we've always spoken directly to consumers as OTC brands. If it's about selling as D2C, it's essentially, I think our partners do a great job. So we don't need to sell directly. I think the power and scale of our partners is so massive that we rather look at leveraging that rather than trying to open up an alternate incremental way to reach consumers. And I think, especially in this industry, the partners play a fantastic role. Chemists, I think the kind of credibility they bring in is you don't see that in, for example, an FMCG setup, right? If I were to compare. So, I think leveraging these partners is the best way to reach to consumers rather than trying to reach directly is how we look at it. And, we've never seen a reason to go do anything else. But other than that, it's, as I said, a lot of conversation with consumers, guiding them, starting with their question rather than a manufacturer view. It's the consumer question of saying, what help do you want? Okay, I have X, Y, Z. And then you sort it out for her basis her need state, rather than saying, I have these X, anyone who wants to buy, please come and buy. So I think there is while it sounds very obvious, but, I would say half of the brands actually end up doing more a manufacturer view than a consumer back view. So the way we do insighting is we go out to consumers and ask them, what problems are you facing? What are your worries? And then look at her larger life. And based on that, we structure our communication so that we are just answering her question rather than telling her what we want to tell her. And we've seen massive success as a result of that.
I think the consumer finally has to be at the node of everything that we're doing. Glad you take us back there, and I think the FMCG voice from within is very, very obvious. I think appreciate that reminder. I'm going to have a quick question on partnerships here before we go into closing forward-looking remarks from all the panelists. Nandan and Ajay, I wonder if you want to comment on, whether you think, you've both spoken about how portfolios to expand, to take science-driven products to consumers, and you've spoken from experience how we've launched several new products during COVID. Do you see, when you come from different parts of the spectrum, traditional science-driven company getting B2C, a strong B2C focus, pharma company, B2C, OTC arm, do you see partnerships being critical to drive that kind of a product portfolio evolution in the near future? Could be manufacturers, product developers, institutions, or just companies like yourselves.
Nandan, you can take the question, I'll answer next.
Sure. So I think external innovation, I think it's a time, the need of an hour. You cannot innovate internally anymore beyond certain point. So you need external innovation. I think that's that's given. For example, and then I think it achieves speed as well as you leverage the talent which is outside of your organization. So it saves time also, and also helps you reach there in a more qualitative way, I would say. Only thing it's already happening with us. We are already working with external partners and ingredient companies and everybody. I think only one thing we would expect is, I think we would expect ingredient companies or these external vendors to bring more data along with the ingredients. I think that's like Sangeetha rightly mentioned, what's happening with vitamin D is quite known ingredient now for many years. But even with new herbal or other ingredients, I think we need them to bring good data to the table so that the partnership can be, really, it really takes off once you see that kind of science and substantiation that is happening, and also the whole quality piece. I think that's what important. But yes, this is a need of the hour, and certainly I think that's the way to go ahead, I would say. Yeah.
Ajay, do you have something to add?
Yes, I think, the early speakers have already talked about consumer centricity, I think, and we've already, all of us have talked about, the opportunity as well. See, I feel collaboration is definitely the way forward, because not one company out here, maybe if you really look at all the panelists, and we all have different sets of strengths and different sets of knowledge. And ultimately now what we are looking at is, how do you reach the consumer? See, the consumer is hungry, the consumer is looking for credible, responsible, validated and quality controlled product, which needs to work for what you claim. I think that's exactly what we've all been talking about. The question is, how do we get the material or the ingredient to the consumer? I think that's where the collaboration must have to evolve, because a single company cannot do everything, I'm sure, because if I'm good at something, I'm primarily good at that, but I'll be good at just that. Maybe the segment of Ayurveda or the natural space, I'm sure Sangeetha would be good at vitamin D. So I would love to collaborate with vitamin D to see that I can take vitamin D to market. So the question is ultimately now, how many consumers do you reach? I think Shivam has mentioned about it. Like, how many eyeballs do you meet? How many people do you sell to? And how many people do you have relationships with? And once the trust factor is established, it never matters what you bring to market, because it is what are you bringing new to the market, and how is it going to help me? So once a credibility is established, I guess it's all a matter of getting new products, more innovative product. And I guess what Nandan said is innovation is the key. I guess that's something that if we would have done in the last many decades, that's the only thing that we've done different. But I feel that provided large bonuses and large, I would say, gains in terms of market access and consumer acceptance, because ultimately it's all about what are the new things we're bringing and how it's helping people. So I'm sure that because the market is definitely going to be very large, and collaboration is the only way forward. I wouldn't say it is not the way. I'd say that's exactly what we need to look at to make this market grow larger. So I guess that's my point.
Thanks, Ajay. So I guess it's about marrying speed to market, innovation, and the consumer reach that Shivam emphasized earlier. We have quite a few questions in the chat box. But before that, request everybody to, one round of closing remarks on what you envision 5 years forward in terms of Indian nutraceutical consumer industry, and then time permitting, we'll answer a question or two. Sangeetha, do you want to get us started in terms of closing remark and looking forward 5 years ahead? Sangeetha, you're on mute.
Can you be a little louder, Pushpa? Sorry.
Sure, Sangeetha. And I was just asking if we can go around for a round of closing comments on what you envision 5 years forward in terms of Indian nutraceutical, OTC consumer space.
Okay. Well, definitely vitamin D here is here to stay. But apart from that, if I'm supposed to be looking at the industry overall, I think the industry ecosystem should, I believe, start working in collaboration. There should be today the academia, industry, the ingredient supplier, the demand side, everybody are in silo. There is certain level of collaboration that happens between an ingredient manufacturer and a brand manufacturer, definitely. But academia, the research institutes, the technology backup, all that we are working on silos. So that I probably feel that ecosystem would change. There would be more collaboration. That's what, there are signs of collaboration that is happening in the industry ecosystem. So that's going to be a big change. I think India as a market is going to be, we were predominantly a raw material supplier. I think now it is changing to a phase of more of value added ingredients coming from India itself. We are now looking at not just the export market, but we have seen that there is a domestic market and consumers, the need of the consumers have been very well understood. Though we are talking about an opportunity, I think most brand manufacturers are looking at sustainable growth models, be it the channels that they communicate, what they communicate, and the credibility part. So the communication aspect is becoming more defined, more responsible. That's another big change that's happening. I think the fourth important aspect is going to be on trials, clinical trials. Because when we are talking about the dietary supplement market, for a drug, it's very well understood how the drug reaches a consumer. But for a dietary supplement, I think there is more, scientific evidence that is required. And what Nandan just said on ingredient manufacturers coming with data, coming with supporters, is becoming very, very critical. And whenever we are talking about data, it's very important that there are certain ingredients that requires population-driven data. It's just not about, copy paste or you can't do that anymore in today's scenario, because every population is, reacting differently and responding differently to ingredients. So that's also another important aspect. So I would say communication, collaboration, then science aspect is all, these all make the next 5 years is going to be very, very critical. And we are going to be seeing big changes on these 4 aspects, in my opinion.
Your 2 cents on key elements when you look forward next 5 years, Shivam?
Very, very well articulated by Sangeetha. I see eventually, we will not be able to keep, a bit of mystery around this space. And eventually, I think we'll see a lot of demystification happen over the next 4 to 5 years. And I'm fairly confident that, all stakeholders will eventually have to come together to make what Sangeetha is saying a reality. So if I were to look ahead into the future, I think 5 years from now, you will see significantly improved consumer understanding, of nutraceutical space, what every ingredient does, what works, what doesn't work, what's actually an effective solution to what's probably a marketing story being carried out by a certain set of brands. So I see a lot of that change, and we've seen, it's an industry which is, I think it's just reached that right inflection point, post which there would be rapid growth. We have already started seeing some of it, and B, it will also be followed by a very clean consumer understanding of how it works. And you see that across industries, right? There's so many examples one can pull out, and every category which has gone through this actually has had an inflection point. And I think inflection point for nutraceuticals is now, and Ayurveda and various other sciences Ajay was talking about. I think they'll all eventually start to merge in terms of consumer benefit. And in the consumer mind, it will become one big whole in terms of what works, what doesn't work, what's my need and what is it that I seek. So that's the biggest change that I see, Pushpa. For sure, industry will grow by leaps and bounds. And I think we've just still scraped the surface. It's a massive, massive opportunity. And I think Nandan spoke about it. It's not about COVID actually anymore. COVID, of course, has been the reason for this, sudden surge, but eventually it will be the larger space. And COVID just has become a rallying cry around it. And I think that's what future holds. Very, very bright future for the industry for sure.
With your quick 2 cents before we conclude, Nandan and Ajay. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Pushpa. I think I feel the whole point, what I see from now on is the markets will evolve. It's already started evolving. I guess there will be a lot of new opportunities as far as product categories are concerned. We've talked a lot on ingredients, but we've not at all talked about categories and subcategories. Consumption, when we really think about consumption, it is going to evolve into various product categories and subcategories which are non-existent today. So if you really look at it, I guess, I'm sure that a few companies have started with gummies. There has to be more consumer-friendly models that we need to evolve, because ultimately ingredients, once it is known, the question is about how do we translate this into for kids or for, senior citizens or for different categories. So I guess that's one real clear area that I think, farm leaders must need to work on. I think that is one of the areas, because the market is definitely not going to ask ingredients in the way we would like to provide it. Like I think, Shivam said, we need to look at consumer-centric approach to what they want, how they want, or what is it, or which format would they want, and when do they want. So these are questions that we need to definitely ask. If these questions are answered, I guess that is definitely going to open up different segments. And when I'm talking about it right from a millennial to a senior citizen, how do we get them? The other point I would like to talk about is it's certainly a point of convergence. I would say a convergence of knowledge, a convergence of innovation, a convergence of capabilities and convergence, which can only happen through collaboration. And like again, Shivam said, I mean, it is not going to be any more Ayurveda or probiotic or vitamin D or, a new science. I mean, it has to be convergence of all the sciences that needs to be brought to the consumer. So don't call it Ayurveda, don't call it herbal, don't call it probiotic, don't call it under any label, call it dietary and nutrition, and then we kind of broadly will be able to put things in context to a consumer in the format that they need and in the way they would like to follow and understand. So I guess this is how I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, this is what I would see as a future rather than trying to say, I belong to this or that. So, and this, if properly, credibly, scientifically, and, well communicated, I guess, will really serve the purpose of the market. Definitely quality and other things being important. Thanks.
Thank you, Ajay. I couldn't be more excited about the optimism. I'm hoping the doctor, who is yet to make his remarks, his prescription is equally optimistic. So Nandan, your last 2 cents before we close.
Yeah, I think already most of the points are covered. I think I could see that the concern will be there even after 5 years. I think we'll see more aware consumer who has more awareness, who is asking for better innovations and more science. So I think overall quite a positive thing from an industry perspective. And that's where I see 5 years down the line. I think we'll see more innovations in this space, more ask from the consumer, more robust data, etc. So I think that's where it looks like. Yeah, thanks.
Thank all of you for joining us this morning and Pharma for, I think, putting together this excellent platform. Could be more excited about the optimism shared. This is such a convergence of thinking around innovation, branding. I think Shivam kept taking us back to the fact that it's consumer need, markets, and market segments, it's finding touch points. But then the science that's powering it and doing it in a way that we infuse confidence, reach consumers in a way that they'd like, and expand markets overall. Looking for that optimism. Thank you so much. Pleasure having this conversation.
Thank you so much for an insightful sessions. I think we kept having questions throughout, and I'm sure there'll be more coming in, if at all, because we'll keep it live for the entire day forward. Even you can log in onto Hubilo and view the session again yourself, right? For all the audience, any more questions, please keep posting it on the chat box. I'm sure we'll be reaching out to speakers on email and get the answers for you. Thank you again to all the panel members for joining in. Before we log off and go to the next question, as I mentioned, the quiz that we are on with, the very next question for the quiz is, name the exhibitor brand who has solutions from R&D labs to logistics for all the industries. You can keep answering the same question on the chat box. I'm going to post the question here as well. Thank you to each one of you on the panel. Thank you for joining in and giving time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care and bye-bye.